Hey everyone and welcome. Today I'm doing an interview with the beautiful Kimberley Smith, who is one of my divorce angels and one of the key players as she's one of our family lawyers. Kimberley owns a company called KJS Legal and has been a family lawyer for 7 years and a mother of a beautiful 6-year-old. So
That's
welcome,
right.
Kimberley.
Hi, how you going? Good, thank you.
That's good. So I just thought we'd provide some key points for our audience, because there's a lot of confusion out there as to how you get divorced, and especially the legal side. I think there's so much misunderstanding in the public realm about what it takes to get divorced and the costs associated with it. So I thought we'd touch on some of those points today. But why did you decide to become a lawyer?
I had a family background of police officers, my grandfather, uncle, various other people in the family, and I'd always wanted to join that career path. But if my physical ability didn't allow me to do that, I had rheumatoid arthritis, so that sort of put me out of that option. And I was trying to look at a best case scenario, how I could still go through into that sort of world. And it became being a lawyer. It's been an interesting road, but it's certainly very rewarding.
So you just always had a need to help people?
Yeah, I'd have. It's a trait that I have, definitely, in terms of both, in my professional career, but also in my personal life. I'm often the go-to, person, sounding board, the advice giver on various levels. So it's certainly been something that's just a natural side of my personality, I guess.
And what do you think makes a good family lawyer?
Somebody who's compassionate, somebody who can give the difficult advice, give the help and assistance in relation to the legal side, but also recognise that it's a very emotional and difficult time for these people. So it's something that you need to be not a robot in terms of how you deal with your clients. It needs to be somebody that you become quite familiar with, that you know the intricacies of their life, their difficulties, and being able to help them through that time, certainly has its rewards.
And it's interesting for me, because some of the clients that we've worked with, we've had the opposing side turn up with sort of lawyers and barristers, and I was interested to understand what's the difference between the two.
A lawyer can both appear in a general sense for their client, and give advice and act with the other solicitor on the other side. They can appear in court, but generally a barrister, once the matter goes through the court process, is the person who would appear, instructed by a solicitor, at the court hearing for the client. Their advocacy skills and their ability to deal with the courts and their experience with those matters gives a client an advantage to have that over a solicitor who doesn't deal with the day-to-day court process themselves. So it's often a combination of solicitors in the initial stages, and then a barrister comes into the process down the track. So there is advantages. You don't have to use a barrister, but it certainly has its advantages down the track if you do.
So we had a case last month where you were defending or acting on behalf of one of our clients, and the opposing side turned up just in actually mediation, wasn't even in court, if I'm correct there, and they turned up with both a lawyer and a barrister, didn't they?
That's right. So it does add a fairly large expense to the process by engaging that, but it also gives the experience and the advantage, if you like, at that point. But it's certainly not necessary at those early stages, and it wouldn't be something that is forced on a client to do that. If they choose to do that, they can, but it's certainly something that, as a solicitor, I'm more than capable of running that process for them.
And I think from what I know about that whole process was that they didn't get a better outcome by having
Not at all.
super hot, did they? She's
No, it was
paid a fortune but didn't get any better outcome.
exactly. In that scenario, it was used as a threat or used as an attempt to bully my client into coming up with a solution that she didn't want to make, but we stood our ground and we ended up with a situation that gave her exactly what we thought we were going to get and not what he thought he was going to get.
That's right. That's a pretty good outcome for because I think totally not that we're here to talk a great deal about money, but he spent more on that one day than she spent her whole period working with us.
That's correct.
Yeah. So and he still didn't get any better.
And he didn't get no, not at all.
So can you explain when we're talking about money here, why are you a fee-for-service lawyer rather than like the majority of lawyers out there that charge hourly or, we all hear about the 6-minute increments and, how the lawyers add them up. Why do you choose to be a fee-for-service lawyer?
Look, I don't feel the need to rip my clients off, if that's the right way to put it. I like to be able to give my client the idea that this is what it's going to cost you. There'll be circumstances where that's not going to quite fit the mould because the particular matter is more involved than a normal straightforward case, but empowering the client and giving them the knowledge that they know what they're going to spend to get to a certain point and understand and be able to comprehend that issue is just makes me feel like I'm doing the service for the client in a better way. Getting a bill at the end of the month and it's cost you $6,000 as opposed to knowing at the start that it'll cost you X amount of dollars is a lot easier for a client to manage. Financially, they're in a difficult position. They've now changed to, a sole income potentially, and it's a much more manageable process for them than, ringing and panicking, thinking I'm going to charge, $60 for this phone call because it's been long. They can know that they can call me and get that advice within that fixed fee arrangement.
Yeah, which is great. I love that. Why do you think overall divorces cost so much? Is there a continual, a thread or something that you see that is actually making people pay so much for their, lawyer services?
The honest answer to that is the people that are involved. So whether the people are amicable, whether they are personality-wise are people who just want to stick to their own position and unwilling to compromise, the lack of compromise and the lack of understanding of the process makes it expensive. If people aren't prepared to negotiate, to participate in the early stages of the matter and not prepared to compromise, that's when it becomes court-issued, more expensive. You get then potentially barristers involved, all those sort of steps come into play, and that's where it becomes out of control. So it's very difficult for some to understand that compromise is important, and it's not a suggestion that they compromise on their position completely, but a willingness to negotiate between the parties is certainly essential to getting the costs to stay at a reasonable level.
And what I love about that is when we're married to someone, our whole marriage is about compromise. And when a marriage breaks down, ultimately it breaks down because we're not compromising. And it just actually, when we go to that divorce thing, it just becomes a snowball, doesn't it? It makes everything so much worse. And we're better off just, and working with you now for some time, you're really great at when you first get the information, you pretty much know what the outcome's going to be, and you tell them right there, and whether they accept that information or not. But you could save a fortune by just going, yeah, she was right from the start. I should have just accepted that, and could have saved myself a fortune. Yeah,
and it's difficult for people to see that at the start. Sometimes it does take a little bit of time for them to understand that they need to let go and to accept that the advice has been given from a professional level, from a personal level, and Sometimes it is a commercial decision to make a choice to settle as opposed to fight about it, because the risks are significant if you don't. And as much as it's not a commercial matter, it does come down to a financial cost and what you're prepared to put into it. And sometimes others don't listen, sometimes others do.
Like recently, I just seem to be hearing more and more every week stories of people that have spent 100,000, like this figure 100,000 just continually keeps coming up. Oh, you know, that we sort of spend $100,000 on our divorce and da da da. It scares the hell out of me, you know, that like that means they've spent 200,000 because you're assuming
Exactly.
spent that same amount of money. Imagine what you could do with that to set your future up if only you weren't so angry and bitter.
That's right. And it really does come to that, which is where this service gives me some confidence that these clients that are coming through you are looking at the bigger picture. They're looking at their financial future. They're looking at their emotional well-being. They're looking at all those issues as a collaborative approach, and letting go of those bitter and angry sort of approaches to the legal side, which means they can come out of this as much as they can control the situation without spending the $100,000.
Well,
It
we're never going to let any of our clients get anywhere near that,
No.
not even, you know, a quarter of that. That's just not going to happen. Otherwise, you're not going to work with us, because we're not into that sort of, we want to set them up, don't we, for their future and help build an amazing, you know, life after whatever they've been through. We don't want them to be dead broke and starting from scratch and bitter and twisted.
Yeah, and my attitude is it's better in your pocket than it is in mine. You know, I'm still being paid for the service that I'm providing, but I want to see my clients be able to move on and have that ability to grow and buy the next house and do all those things that if you're spending $100,000, you're not going to be able to do.
If only more lawyers were like that. So the other confusion out there is that people think that when they're going to get divorced, it's just divorce. You just go to a lawyer and you get divorced. But there's a few different stages. So could you just explain those to us, please?
So divorce basically is just the ending of the legal marriage. It's a very simple process. It is not a process that you argue with each other. It is a no fault these days. You don't have to prove that either party was at fault for the reason of the breakdown of the marriage. Paperwork submitted to the court. There's children, then there's a court appearance, but it takes all of about 5 minutes. It's a simple process, but people have the idea that that means that all the other issues get dealt with at the same time. In fact, there's 3 steps: divorce, your property settlement, and if you've got children under 18, then parenting matters. So it's a 3-step or a 2-step, depending on who you are or your circumstances, approach to finalising this marriage or de facto relationship or any of the, you know, same-sex marriage situation. It is 2 separate issues. You've got the separation of the marriage and you've got the property or parenting matters.
It's interesting because I sort of, you know, quite regularly we spend more time actually on the financial and the parenting than we actually do the divorce, which everyone thinks is sort of the hardest bit. It's actually the other way around, isn't it?
It is, definitely.
It's that negotiation of split of assets that actually seems to take so much time, because that's what everyone's so emotional about. It
is. And look, the divorce is often the cathartic or the step that's taken after all of that's over, because they think, well, I'm going to finish it now. This is the last step, and that's a quick process. It's the negotiation, the arguing, the compromise, all of those issues put into both the property settlement, which has its emotional issues, but also the parenting matters that come into it, which is highly emotional, that takes significant time to negotiate where the parties aren't prepared to compromise on those issues.
So what when you're talking about a financial separation, or let's talk finances, because that seems to be what everyone's so worried about.
Yep.
What are the key factors or drivers in who gets what and how that's divided?
Yeah, again, there's a step process. So there's pre-relationship or pre-marriage, who had what assets, what liabilities, basically who brought what into the marriage. That's initially looked at, because that can then have an impact on what that person takes out of at the end during the relationship. So who worked, who didn't work, who was the primary care of children, who inherited money, who didn't. All those factors come into play to adjust what we generally start at a 50-50 split, to push it in the favour of one or the other party. Then we look at future needs. So at the end, if one party is close to retirement and the other has got 15 working years left, they've got the potential to increase their assets, their income, their superannuation into the future over and above someone else. Or it may be that there is young children, that prevents a parent from earning an income, and we assume it's the mother, but generally, it can be the father that's the stay-at-home parent. That will have an impact on what the property split looks like down the track. So it's not just, I earned more money and therefore I should get a greater share. And it's not simplistic like that. There is a number of factors that need to look at before you can come up with the solution as to what that property settlement looks like.
Yeah, because we've sort of had some conversations, and I can understand where people get this from. But if someone's been hard done by in the relationship, unfortunately, if it was a perfect world, they might deserve more in a split. But unfortunately, that's not how the court sees it, is it?
That's right.
Someone could do something terrible, they'd go and have an affair, be just an absolutely awful person. But the court's not going to care about those actions, where unfortunately there's a miscomprehension out there that if you've been treated badly or something like that, you're going to get more in the division of assets.
That's completely right. It's a difficult and it's a moral issue. Unfortunately, the law doesn't look at morals. It looks at what is the legislation and how do we apply that to your particular situation. So whether somebody has cheated on you, whether somebody has been domestic violence victims, none of that, unfortunately, comes into play in what a property settlement looks like. And realistically, it comes down to numbers. We look at what percentage somebody is worth, and what that is based on those factors I've just mentioned before about, contribution is what it looks like, who contributed what, and it's not just financial, it's non-financial contributions. So parenting matters, those sorts of things are all balanced and weighed up into a percentage.
Yeah. Is there something key, or is it what do you see as the biggest mistake in your day-to-day job that people are doing wrong that is actually costing them more money than it needs to?
Probably waiting. So waiting to do a property split, and I'm not suggesting that it's the right thing to do a property split the day after he walks out the door or she walks out the door, or it's discovered that something's gone wrong. It's something that you don't wait years, because the property settlement takes place at the date you do that property settlement, not the date of separation. So if you've saved a lot of money, if you've changed jobs, if you've got your career and path, if you've built up a business, all those sorts of things come into play at the settlement date and can have an impact on what that split might look like, as opposed to what it would have looked like if it was done in the 6 to 12 months post-separation.
Yeah, because there's sort of a real lack of information out there on the process, isn't there? And that's what we're trying to change. So we're trying to get out there and give the information to people so they know that if you act this way, it could save you some money. And it was interesting because you and I were having a conversation last week when, once again, my stupid addiction to numbers, and I was doing all the census information and found out that the common the average marriage in Australia lasts 8 years, but that from separation, but the average divorce is 12 years. So it means that there's 4-year period there that most couples, and if you look at 2016, there was 47,000 divorces. Yep. So on average, those couples were waiting 4 years, which, as you just said, is the biggest mistake they can make because they just continue to grow assets.
That's right. And particularly if one is a spender and one's a saver, well, then the spender who's living the life is going to benefit from that person who's saved their money and done the right thing and or put it into assets. There is some ability to hive off those assets, but generally bank accounts, business values, those sorts of things will be taken as at the time of the settlement is done, which in experience I've had somebody who's waited 14 years and she has continued to work and he's sat on his behind on a pension, which is dubious as to whether he should or shouldn't have it, but she's now suffering the consequences of it was just too easy to stay in the same house but live separately. Now she's got the problem that she's sharing assets that she's grown over that time with him 14 years later.
Oh, so she's worked really, really hard. Yep. He's on a dubious pension and sitting at home, and now she's got to share those assets with him after 14 years of really not being
living separately.
Wow. Yeah, that's alarming, isn't it?
It is, and it's very difficult as a lawyer to try and explain that to the client that I know it's not fair, but that's how it works. And it's too late. You can't fix it once the time's passed. It's getting the education out there to people who are going through this process to do it as soon as emotionally they're able to do it, but don't wait years because it's going to have an impact on you.
So a question would be, so if I was actually going through a divorce today, I could come to you and I could straight away start my financial agreement and my parenting agreement, but I don't actually need to get divorced until 12 months from now. Is that right?
That's right. So you can't actually be divorced for 12 months and a day or start that process. The divorce actually triggers another issue in terms of your property settlement too. So if you do your divorce, because some people feel that that's the most cathartic or the most revenge that they can give to the other side, to serve those divorce papers. If you take that step and action that first, then you're cutting your time in terms of what you can do in using the court process to settle your property settlement down the track. So you would only have 12 months from the date of divorce to actually use the court, if it couldn't be resolved between you, to settle your property settlement, which could have dire consequences to you if you can't get a negotiation happening between you and the other party. The divorce part for me is always the second option. That's once you've got everything else sorted out, then we worry about the divorce part.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, you're wanting to jump into that next marriage where the divorce is necessary, but certainly sorting out your property, knowing where you're at, your children, getting that sorted out, and then worry about your divorce is a much better process.
Yeah. So what's your thought, and this is probably a really, really hard question, but given the people that you deal with and I suppose the demographics of who we work with, what should an average divorce cost? And I know that's a really hard question because I try and find this data. I've searched high and low. A lot of people aren't releasing it. But is there a gut feel for you that a divorce should not cost any more than X amount?
Okay, so I'm going to change that word again.
Please.
What does a property settlement cost? Because a divorce might cost you $1,000. The filing fee and that process that's the cheap end. That's not what costs you money. The property settlement, look, if you're amicable and you've got a reasonable idea of what that property settlement looks like and it works in terms of legal obligations for me, it could be as little as $3,000 to $5,000. If you're not amicable, the average court costs of going through, and most files don't go through to the end, but even through part of the process, you're looking at 10 to 15,000. If you push it further through that process and get to the first major stage in a court process, you're looking at 20. Through to the end, anywhere between 20 and 40, up to 100, depending on how difficult people are and argumentative. And the complexity of the situation. If you've got a mum and dad with a house and 2 cars and super, well, there's not a lot to argue about. If you're looking at somebody who's got significant business assets and companies and trusts and various properties that you're trying to negotiate on a fair and reasonable settlement, then there is an additional cost in doing that, obviously. But an average court costs 20 to 40,000.
Yeah. And I suppose that's why we work so hard, don't we, to try and not get to that. We want to make sure that before anyone even comes to you, and that's another reason that we cut costs, is because they're already sort of prepped in how they speak to you, aren't they? Because what we're trying to do is another way that you get your legal bill up if you go into these these hourly lawyers, is that if you think you're going to turn up and be telling them all the emotional stuff, oh my God, he gave me a phone call last night and he's done this and I can't believe he's done that, or she's done this and da da da.
Yep.
What we're all about is there's professionals for each of them, and if you want to have an excessive legal bill, tell your lawyer all the emotional stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. And look, there is an emotional side, and I need to understand the emotional side to a degree, but I'm not a counsellor. I don't have the skills to counsel somebody. I can look at the emotional side and take that to understand how I need to advise you and guide you in terms of that process, but I can't help a client in relation to resolving those emotional or mental health issues related to the breakdown of the marriage, and they're better off speaking to somebody who's obviously got those skills. It's a difficult line to draw as to how much a lawyer will take on, but if the client understands the best person to help them with that is a counsellor or a psychologist or those sorts of professionals, then it certainly helps them understand where the line is for them.
Yeah, well, so there's 2 benefits. Firstly, you're speaking to a professional that can actually help you and guide you. And secondly, you're not getting this just exacerbated sort of bill at the end, and you go, well, where did this all come from? Because you've been ringing them or you've been emailing them about things that you just want to, as well as you said, you're quite compassionate, but you want to stick to the facts, and the facts are what will help you do your job.
Yeah, and as we discussed before, the emotional part doesn't come into play in terms of the legal effect and result. So me addressing those issues is not going to be of any legal benefit to the client.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's not going to change the outcome that somebody was a horrible person to get a different outcome. That just doesn't come into play.
So just before we sort of finish up here, I'd love to hear about what was your worst client? Who's your worst client that you've dealt with, and why? What did they do wrong that just made everything just get out of control and out of hand?
Yeah, look, the worst client, and I'm going to generalise that, the worst client is somebody who doesn't listen, who doesn't want to hear the advice, who doesn't accept my advice or my experience in terms of what the outcome's going to be. Yes, you can have a doubt or that sort of thing, but if you continue to act as a client against my advice, then I can't help those people. I can only help people who are willing to listen, and sometimes it takes time to get that advice understood and that position, and that taking the moral issue out of the matter. But it's the one who doesn't listen and then goes and does things like contacting the other side or contacting the other lawyers or doing those things that are not helping them and certainly not helping me in running their case for them. So it's never a case that I told you so down the track, that here's the advice I gave you and that we got to the end and you've got exactly what I've told you that you would have got. But understanding that I'm not trying to make life difficult or do any of that. It's the reality of the situation, and guiding that person to understand that doesn't want to hear it is the most difficult client to have.
So is there, and are you able to give us sort of some little secret in the legal industry? Is there something out there that we should know that's common practice there that, really we should all be aware of?
Look, I always tell my clients from the start, particularly if there's parenting issues or, significant property issues that they've got concerns, is keep a diary. Keep a diary from the start. You may see people that come to you before they've actually separated. It's certainly something that I would suggest to you to tell them, is to keep notes, keep text messages, keep emails, keep a diary of what's happened, when it happens, how it happens, because it's much easier to have that contemporaneous information there and then, that they don't have to think about down the track and remember these issues or what happened or who paid those sorts of things, or, it just makes life for the lawyer down the track easier to understand how this has all progressed. But also it can be cathartic for the person to make those notes and let it go and leave it in the book and walk away. But it's also means that the stress can be reduced by the fact that they have written it down and it's out of their mind. They don't have to hold it in their head till the next time they see me. That would be something that I would certainly suggest to a client that is coming in through your service, that they do that process.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice. I actually, when people start working with me, they get a checklist, and it's got probably, it was 21. It keeps growing and evolving because there's new things that keep popping up and we keep adding to it. But the checklist is something that they can take away, and it's, things like superannuation policies, insurance policies, the list goes on. But heard this story last week about a woman left her husband probably 12 months ago. He's living in the house, and there's been a flood, but his name is on the insurance policy. Her stuff's still in the house, and so are the kids, but the insurance policy's paid out this cash $50,000 to the husband because he's on the policy. He's gone and spent the money. She can't even get her furniture or anything. So the list that we've been collaborating on and things like that is something that we give to all our clients, and we sit there and we go through, tick all of these off, make sure your accounts, you redraw on your loan, your insurances, health cover, Medicare, the list. And we continue to grow that document because it's a living document. It's what we learn, what we hear, and it's that sort of stuff that can save people just so much anxious problems.
100%. And look, many of the clients that I see, they've never had to deal with those sorts of things before. The husband or the wife has been the primary person dealing with bank accounts, mortgages, all of that, insurance policies, and they wouldn't even know who they're insured with. So finding that information out, making sure you've got all that, because that's essential for you to be able to give that either to you or directly to me, to be able to work out what the asset pool is, what we're dealing with, what we don't have, what we do have in place, all those things that empower them to be able to have the knowledge and have the confidence that they can live on their own, they can survive without the other partner. Is much of a learning process for them, and also helpful in the legal sense as to where we go from there.
Yeah. So in closing, I suppose I'd love to ask you, so you and I have been working together for a little while now. After being obviously a family lawyer for 7 years, what do you see is the difference of how the old system was and what we're trying to build as an army of angels or a collective now?
Yeah, look, the clients that walk off the street to me and don't have that background first, they're much more difficult to deal with in terms of they don't know what they don't know. They don't have any experience. All they've got is somebody who, their sister's been through a divorce, or their, shopkeeper who sells them coffee is just separated from their husband, and they've got this idea and advice from everyone who's well-meaning but doesn't understand how it works. And they've got an idea in their head as to what that means and where they're going and what has to happen. Whereas on the other side, where they've come through your service, they've got the knowledge, they've got some, they're being empowered with the ability to make decisions for themselves. They've got the confidence, as much as, can happen in that short period, but they're on that track to getting that ability to deal with this process that's highly stressful, costly to a degree, less than where you can go elsewhere, but it's still going to cost them money, and they still have to factor that into their new life. It just means that it's a much smoother process. It's much more satisfying at the end. They don't feel like they've been dictated to how this is going to happen. They've got that guidance and information that they just can't get elsewhere, which makes everything much smoother and happier in the end.
So that's obviously from the client's perspective. From your perspective, how do you feel? What's it like working with other women that are business owners that have expertise in areas that you don't have? Does that help you?
It certainly does, because I'm not legally allowed to give financial advice, and I wouldn't, because I don't have the knowledge. Accounting advice, I can't give that. But working together with that group means that I can give my client the best opportunity in the legal side, because they've got those issues worked out. They've spoken to their finance broker, spoken to their accountant, they've spoken to the counselling side if they need that issue that helps them get a lot more confidence in making these wider legal decisions. It means that the overall process for me is much more simple.
Yeah.
I don't have to go and source that information or rely on them to go and get it, because they don't know where to go. They've got access to all of that, and I can communicate directly with those people to be able to get that
that's
outcome.
what I really love about what we're doing, is that we're all discussing the best interest of our client, and they're involved in that communication. So they're sitting there and going, my God, these women just have my back. They are completely supporting everything, and I feel trusted. They're relieved. They're looking forward to their future, aren't they?
They are. And look, to be honest, dealing with that where everybody is working for the greater good of that particular client, as opposed to, they may walk in the door and say that, yes, I've got a financial planner or I've got a mortgage broker. Those people have got no connection to me, and therefore there's no...
you can't just ring them up, can you?
I can't just ring them up. I don't know them from, anybody else, and whether they've got an attitude to working with lawyers, which some of them do, that I'm going to, make their advice less important. It's not like that through this process. We all work together, and it certainly makes my life easier.
Yeah, well, I think it's amazing. We're building an absolutely great bunch of people, not only in Victoria but around Australia. And I am so lucky to have you on my team. You're amazing and you're very good at what you do, and the clients absolutely love you. So, Kimberley, I wanted to thank you for your time today. Thank you for providing this information to our audience. And, obviously, everything that we've said today is general advice. Everyone needs to come and have a chat to us about their particular advice, but we've tried to give some high-level information, haven't we?
We have, yeah, definitely.
Is there anything you'd like to say before we go?
No, I think we've covered it all, but certainly happy to help anyone that needs that help.
Yeah. So where can people find you?
My email address is kimberley@kjslegal.com.au. I'm sure you'll put it up on some website or wherever. Otherwise, by phone is the easiest to get me on, 0473 835 145.
Yep, or you can actually come through me and I'll put together everyone that is best for your particular circumstances. And as Kimberley said, just because the lady that's making the coffee down the road went to one lawyer or your sister went to another, it does not mean that that is the right lawyer for you. And it's so important to make sure that we go to the right people for the job. And that's what my job is to do, is to make sure that I place every client with the right team of professionals to get the best outcome for them and their circumstances.
Exactly. So, yeah,
so
definitely.
Thank you, Kimberley. It's been so wonderful chatting to you again, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon. So
no problem. Thanks, Tanya.
That's okay. Bye. Thanks.